everyone, and you're all very welcome to today's Client Experience Programme webinar on growing your network for personal and business success. As many of you know, the focus of this programme is twofold. First, we're focused on bringing you insights on the issues that matter most to in-house legal teams. And the second is all around supporting your personal development. And that's very much where today's session is actually rooted. So whether it's engaging with your in-house team internationally, or maybe you're thinking about building relationships with stakeholders throughout the business or outside of the business perhaps, the strength of your personal network is absolutely critical for success. In terms of today's session, lots of you will have seen our confirmation note. We have had a last-minute change of speaker. Unfortunately, due to a family bereavement, Derek Howard can't be with us today. But fortunately, and an excellent example of leveraging personal networks, we're very excited to be joined by Alyssa Grafton, who will be leading our session today. And Alyssa brings such a wealth of experience in the legal industry and will be sharing that with you today. I would encourage you, it is a networking session, so really do get the most out of this. You know, pop any questions you have in the chat, turn on your camera if you can and your environment allows, and really, you know, think about, you know, what you were taking from today's session, okay? As always, we love to start by getting everybody involved. So we will start with a poll, and in fact, two polls today. We'd love to understand how important do you see building and maintaining a strong network? You know, is it really important, extremely important? Maybe you see it as relatively important. You might feel it's somewhat important, or you're not fully convinced. You're a little bit skeptical of today's session and don't really see it as important to your role. There is a second question. So we'd also love to understand at this point, so that we can really focus the content, what you'd like to get from today's session. So is it a structured approach to networking? Maybe it's practical tips on what other people find works well. Maybe it's ideas on how to overcome some of maybe the challenges or barriers, or maybe it's suggestions on how to prioritize networking. Or maybe there's something else on your mind. And if that's the case, pop it in the chat and click the other option for us. It's lovely to see lots of people already indicating their preferences here. We'd love to get as many of you as possible. So we will do a little countdown. We'll go 5, 4, right? The number is still going up. 3, 2. Can we get a little bit more? Wow, excellent. Super response. 1. Okay. Who's for any last minute takers? Excellent, great. And we're going to share the results. And I'm going to straight away put Alyssa on the spotlight, you know, to maybe give us her take here. Obviously, extremely important is how people are feeling about this topic. And interestingly, and slightly different from this morning, it's practical tips on what works well. Any initial thoughts, Alyssa, on that?
Excellent. I'm just very excited that it seems that we are already all on the same page, because everyone who is here this afternoon are agreeing with us that networking is indeed extremely important to the career development, but also just to general satisfaction with life, professional life specifically. And the fact that people are looking at developing this structured approach to networking, and also perhaps getting reminded on the best practical tips to get themselves going and really progressing within their networking efforts. This is also a great indication that we are going to have a hopefully very productive session this afternoon.
Without further ado, Alyssa, I'm going to hand over to you to take everybody through today's session.
Thank you very much, Niamh, and good afternoon, everyone. Very briefly to introduce myself, my name is Alyssa Grafton. I'm a lawyer based in London, and I have been working and practicing for about 23 years now. I'm also the author of a book that came out last year called Great Networking, The Art and Practice of Building Authentic Professional Relationships. And I'm currently combining my legal career as a consultant, with my career as a speaker, as an educator, and an expert on all things to do with networking, intergenerational engagement, and professional relationships. And really, the reason why I have chosen talking about these very important subjects as part of my career is because I have hugely benefited from networking myself. And I attribute a big part of my professional success to learning, actually to learning the magic of networking and progressing this throughout my professional career. I would like to take you today through what is to expect. So we are obviously going to touch on the why we are, why network? Actually, why should we put all this effort and concentrate on networking in our already really busy professional life? We're going to look at the mindset that helps us to progress with networking and the essential stages of networking that are sometimes forgotten about, and therefore networking stops being as effective as it could be. We will talk about the point of putting giving ahead of receiving. We are also touching on the habits and thoughts and practices that actually hold us back sometimes our best efforts. We will also briefly touch on the intergenerational aspects of professional engagements, because there is no way to ignore the fact that today is probably the first time in a human history where we have up to 5 generations of people working alongside each other. And obviously it puts, it's exciting, but it also puts significant pressure on learning how to network, how to communicate and network well with someone who has ever so slightly different take on things. And finally, well, last but not least, for sure, we will also remind what the kind of best practices are when it comes to networking, because as we know, practice makes progress. And networking is an extremely practical skills, and I have no doubt that all of you, a vast majority of you, would have had a huge experience networking, but it's always a good idea to be reminded what works, what doesn't, and perhaps if you have any feedback to share with us, either during the session in the chat or following the session, it would be hugely appreciated. Now, why do we network? Well, the answer to this question is obviously different for different people, and it really depends on your professional objectives and also on your personal objectives. What I know for me is that networking has played a huge part in just about every aspect of my professional life. I have gained mentors, sponsors through networking. I have transitions with the whole teams of institutional clients from one firm to another, just on the strength of personal relationships that I had formed with those clients. I have found new clients. I have gained myself a free time discussing some important issues with experts in their field through mutual contact, and the list goes on and on and on. So as you would probably, as you have sensed, I'm really passionate about the subject because networking truly has had a transformational effect on my professional life and in fact, my personal life as well. But we also know that, perhaps if we could have the previous slide, I'll just touch on one point. We all know through experience, but also, well, the research tells us, but we also know empirically that actually relationships have profound effect on our levels of happiness. We know that being in a good, working, effective relationships can make a huge difference in our personal life, but the professional life is not an exception. We all have been in a position where we are constantly frustrated because things are not moving, because we do not have the engagement from our teams. And this, this really can have a significant effect on our lives, especially if you in a position of certain seniority and rely on the teams up and down the hierarchy to make things happen. And I know that many of you are general counsels and work in house and kind of hold fairly senior positions. So really, the task for you would be to make sure that you get things done without getting bogged down in the nitty-gritty problems of the day. So you would need to really have exceptional engagement with those teams, and you forming of strategic alliances with different teams really would make the difference between making these things happen and making really hard work or fairly simple tasks. So it's the level of engagement with different stakeholders which would mean that a task gets done effectively. In the context of today's webinar, we are looking at networking as an opportunity to build authentic, trustworthy, genuine, and effective relationships. And these relationships in the hierarchy of any organization can be built upwards or downwards. And it's just as important to have trust at the at sort of focus of our networking efforts, because this is what will indicate to the teams that we are working for their best, we have their best interest in mind. This is really very important, because when our teams know that it's the engagement that we are after, so the building of these authentic relationships that are at this are our priority, then the response we will be getting is very different. There's the difference between getting a job done and actually engaging with people on a very human level, because this is where any relationship starts. Networking really does, slightly sort of going back to the generic term networking. Networking is often seen as, or receives a, I think, undeservingly bad rap as the art of sleazy sales. But actually, networking is about turning shallow connections into working, effective professional relationships. And as I have already mentioned, whilst in some corporate environments, it is to do with getting more clients. So, kind of evolving relationships with the outside this organization. For in-house lawyers, networking will be mainly focused inwards, inside the organization, and it really is about building strategic alliances with teams, with different stakeholders at different levels, that ultimately will make it possible for you to do your job in the most effective way. And although this is a lesser known meaning of networking, it is nonetheless, it is networking nonetheless. And the same rules of forming relationships, of connecting with people, following up with people, nurturing relationships apply inside the organization as they do for those that are aiming to network outside of the organization. We could have the next slide, please. So going back to trust. Trust is the fundamental elements of professional relationship that's developed through networking. Trust is not something, when we're talking about trust, we're not talking about the trust and the professional ability, because, and the expertise, that goes without saying. But the quality of trustworthiness is very much something, it's one of the biggest compliments, no doubt, and it's something that is developed through integrity, through developed emotional intelligence, and through a very healthy measure of empathy. Why is trust important in the context of working as an in-house lawyer? Why trust matters? Well, as I have just alluded to, sort of the importance of the internal trust between a leader and the team is to do with the fact when the team knows that the leader has their best interest in mind, then there will be, that kind of helps to strengthen the relationship, and therefore the team will be much readier to accept any suggestions and guidance from the leader. So you can see how the relationship forms, strengthens, and actually endures some potential challenges. Likewise, when we're looking at networking upwards, if the trust is established with the executives, then they're much more likely to be more flexible and willing to sort of to perhaps look at the different approaches as compared to the situation when the trust is simply missing from any relationship. And once again, I will emphasize that here we're not talking about the trust, as sort of trust in the expertise, but the trust that is developed in the interpersonal relationship that becomes a professional relationship. We can now go to the next slide. So I was very candid at the start of this talk by saying that actually networking has had a transformative effect on my career. And I know that networking can be viewed as purely perfunctory, something that just needs to be done because I was told that it's really good for my career. But it actually misses the point, the sort of, what is at the heart of networking. And what is at the heart of networking is the human-to-human relationship. It may be a professional relationship or a relationship for the professional benefit, but ultimately at the heart of it, we have a very human-to-human relationship. And the simple understanding of this fact will really help to set you up with the best mindset. And this is a great segue for us to shortly be discussing the mindset which will help us to develop. Well, I have already sort of hinted to the fact that one of the perhaps the main three elements that I will be touching on today. So one of the elements of this helpful mindset, constructive mindset, is the ability to see networking, or understanding that networking is ultimately inherently human. It's something that we do not need to invent, we do not need to create. It's something that we will want to do. Traditionally, we evolved as a society through collaborating and relating to each other ultimately. The other element of that helpful mindset that will help us to progress in our path to network, to becoming an effective networker, is understanding the reason why we network. We started with this question: why do you network? Why do we network? Well, as I said, this really depends on your purpose. So now we will take maybe 30 to 60 seconds of our time, and I encourage you to think of what it is that you would like to achieve in your career in the foreseeable future or in your professional life, and to think of the people that might be able to help you on your way to do this. So this is how we identify our purpose as networkers. And as you are writing these things down, think about think along the lines of, do I want to create some some context within my organization. Am I looking for a sponsor? Am I looking for a mentor? Am I looking for a new member of the team to join my my team? Am I looking to kind of to actually transition to a different team, and I would like to meet someone who can help me with this? Or am I looking to network outside of the organization? Am I looking to find more people who are on the same peer level as I am, but perhaps we can compare notes? Am I looking to, to transition into slightly different field? So all of these things really will inform you what is your purpose. And it would be really great, actually, if some of you would like to share your findings in the chat or following the event. Would be really good for us to understand, what result you came up with. What are your thoughts on how to, what your why is, what is your purpose for engaging in networking. So I hope that this has been a useful exercise. And this is just hold this thought, because we will look at the purpose in a little bit more detail slightly later on. But for now, I wanted to again go back to basics, if you like, and look at the third element of the constructive mindset that I have mentioned. So what is networking? A lot of people would think that networking is limited to this initial connection, going to a networking event, shaking hands with people, exchanging business cards, perhaps connecting on LinkedIn, and that's it, dropping out of each other's lives. Well, this is really not a very helpful approach, because if this is all you do when it comes to networking, then don't be surprised when this kind of old adage that networking does not work actually comes true for you, because networking does not work for those people who do not work on networking. And in my mind, networking actually consists of three very distinct stages, and that initial connection only occupies the first stage. So the first stage of networking is, or the networking process, is that kind of the forming of the initial connection. It's really the confidence of coming up to someone, shaking their hands, introducing yourself, having that initial icebreaking small talk, and then delving deep into deeper conversations. But just as important is to progress, or perhaps more important, is to progress to the further two stages. The second stage here is following up. Without a follow-up, there is no relationship. There is only connection. And the follow-up includes kind of developing this initial connection into a more rounded relationship. That's kind of picking up on those conversations that you started during the initial connections, and then developing them into something that can be of mutual benefit further down the line. Developing the commonality between you, finding more points where you have mutual overlapping interests. That is what the follow-up about. And in practical terms, follow-up is that email or that you send following the initial connection, or a message sent another way, but sort of something that really kind of works as a further stage to develop the initial connection. But again, the follow-up is simply the first part to developing a relationship, but it's not relationship. The relationship is formed through nurturing, and first nurturing and then maintaining of that kind of your mutual interest in each other. Nurturing and maintenance is done through mutual support, through regular communication, through mutual help, through providing each other with context, connections. These are all of the things that you would expect to do in any relationship, but this is part and parcel of the essential work as a networker. And it's really interesting that for those people that appreciate the kind of the significance of the 3 stages of networking, they do not doubt that this is exactly how networking should be viewed, as a process, as a strategic process. But those people who leave it at the first stage are often the ones who find that the relationships just dies a death even before it's given a chance to develop. And I'm often reminded Woody Allen's of the Woody Allen's quote when he said that relationship is like a shark. It needs to keep moving or it dies. And to that end, actually, it's very much within your strategy to ensure that the relationships that you want to develop, that you do not want to die, are looked after. What how do we do that? Actually, we come across so many people, we form so many relationships, we receive so many connections on LinkedIn. We are often overwhelmed with a request to connect. How do we actually prioritize? How do we strategize and prioritize the relationships that deserve to be prioritized in our life? Well, different people do it differently. I can share with you my tried and tested practice that I find has worked for me. And being a quite systematic person, I find that it all starts with a strategy. So we have now talked about our purpose, our why, the reason for actually turning up the event at an event, a network, and knowing exactly where do we want to get to with the new connections that we make. Now, when we do come across connections that we want to keep and develop and nurture and maintain, this would be your strategically most important relationships. They're the ones I call this context my green context, because I have this traffic light of context: green, amber, and red. So my green contexts are the one that I want to focus all of my energy on. These are the relationships that I definitely do not want to die, and they're the relationships that I constantly and proactively nurture, and I use different opportunities to hopefully meet in person or find other ways to keep those relationships alive and developing. Then there are always going to be relationships such as with people that I genuinely whose company I genuinely enjoy and I genuinely like, but perhaps we have less in common at a given moment, and these are my amber relationships. So relationship with people that I follow up with fairly regularly. We stay in each other's lives, but these are not on. They do not take the top priority on my strategic list. And then the other relationships that I call my red relationships are the ones that I'm aware of, and I do what I can, utilizing the wonderful potential of professional social media such as LinkedIn to stay in each other's lives, but they're not the ones that I'm actively nurturing and maintaining, because it's impossible to be doing this with 5,000 plus relationships. But nonetheless, this is really, really important to understand that the key is always in your hands. And if you drop a relationship, it's unlikely to develop and to grow in and to develop its full potential. I think we can have the next slide now. Thanks, Neve. So before we go into kind of the other practical aspects of networking, a couple of words about the giving attitude when it comes to networking. So some of you may have heard the phrase "give as gain," be prepared to give ahead of receiving, and it's a very important sentiment when it comes in the context of networking. One of the criticism that the process or the term networking, the process of networking usually gets is that it can be seen as something that's fairly kind of selfish. So people attend networking events gather contacts that they would then use for their, for their personal gains in order to progress themselves, and sort of then drop those contacts, those relationships, once they have leveraged their usefulness. Well, this is obviously a very short-sighted way of looking at things, because anyone who develops the reputation for just getting something of the relationships without giving is not going to have those relationships delivering in the long term. So this idea of bringing something to the table first and foremost is hugely important. And what I mean by sort of what can you bring into the table? And obviously it depends on your position, and on your situation, but we are talking about sort of something that you are able to offer, be it help, be it contacts, a set of contacts, referrals, but being open to provide something to your new contacts is hugely important, because it sets the right tone for any relationship that will have any legs in the future. And the other reason why giving attitude is important is simply because it's kind of takes away from that idea of seeing anyone's success as very exclusive and egocentric. Give us naturally focus on the greater good, and they cultivate their networks in order to benefit other people in their networks other than themselves. And it really makes their success more inclusive, but it also makes their success that essential platform to kick-start the achievements of others. So it starts this process, which is it's a very powerful process, because it places the giving person at the very heart of very exciting developments. So although coming to any relationship with a giving attitude is not absolutely compulsory and essential, but what is important is that, it's essential and compulsory, but it's not going to get the results immediately, but it is really important because it will set you in the right frame of mind to actually develop very effective and authentic relationships going forward. We have now come to a very exciting point where we're going to talk about things that that can hold us back. And this is probably my favorite topic when it comes to networking, because this is all to do with what we think about ourselves rather than what happens in reality. And interestingly, many of us share the same fears, many of us share the same thoughts. That is why it's really helpful to bring this out in the open. And I will be very candid sharing with you, what I have long suffered from, and really what held me back from developing my full potential through my networking efforts. So if we think of the constructive mindset as something that is an essential foundation, our thoughts, habits, and behaviors are like the walls. And if we do not have these sorted out, then the house, our networking sort of structure that we're building is not going to work. But before we actually go into the specifics of things that hold us back, here is a very helpful poll. What is your biggest challenge? I'm going to leave it to Niamh to present it.
Thanks, Alyssa. So Alyssa's taking you through and hopefully giving you lots of food for thought around why network, the stages of networking. But I suppose this one is centered around what's stopping us do it. So we'd love to get your views and input on this. Is it time? Do you just find, you just can't squeeze it into the day? Maybe it's not a priority because of your workload, because of your role. You're not sure how to go about it. Maybe it's confidence, you just really don't enjoy it. or is it something else? And if you're choosing the other option, just pop us a note in the chat so that we can get a sense of maybe, you know, other reasons why you feel that, I suppose, you know, you're not jumping out of bed in the morning to develop those relationships. It's lovely to see lots of people indicating their preferences here. We would like to get, as always, as many of you as possible, letting us know how you feel about the barriers here. So we will give it a little countdown. So we'll go 5, 4, 3, 2. Any last minute voters there? 1. Fantastic. Okay, excellent. Great. And we'll share the results. So Alyssa, I know you're dying to have a look at these ones and give us your take on them.
This is not a surprise, but it's always very interesting because every audience will have their own take on what holds, what are their biggest challenges are. And with a hand on my heart, I can relate to all of these and other. So time is absolutely, I mean, we're talking about a cohort of exceptionally busy professional people. And one of my tasks today is really to to question the myth that networking is that kind of nice to have when it comes to career, because really it's as I hope that I have at least kind of tried to indicate, when we get our networking efforts right, we realize that we can make our life a lot more effective because we have those strategic alliances with people. When we have strategic alliances, I engage staff, engaged teams around us, it makes our daily work a lot more productive. So in fact, it saves us time because we do not need to constantly develop new relationships in order to get things happen. So my vote really is to always invest time in the relationships, because those relationships can then be good working relationships, can be leveraged later on to get things done a lot more effectively, a lot quicker. And this is a very important actually point to bear in mind, especially for senior busy professionals, because it can seem slightly counterintuitive, but it is actually in practice, this is how it will work. So investing now in networking will save the time. And as to the the priority, too busy sort of comes into this. These things in many ways overlap. So, and the other points of the lack of confidence or a lack of enjoyment and the lack of practice or perhaps knowledge is something that we are aiming to address in this talk. But I cannot help but mention that obviously networking as a practice, it's a process. It's a process that will get easier and better the more time we invest into it. So the knowledge, attending webinars like such as these ones, gaining the knowledge is hugely important, but also that's having the courage to putting this knowledge into practice really what would make the biggest difference. So I would encourage you all to do exactly that. And now going back into the things that hold us back.
Alyssa, we have lovely contributions there. Gina, I know you're planning to touch on it. Thank you, Gina and Jacob. Gina says, trying to find creative and authentic ways beyond standard networking. So I know you're going to cover that as we move through the next number of slides. And Jacob, thank you as well. I think we all feel the awkwardness of the whole thing. So great.
And this is actually really well-timed comments, because this is exactly what I'm going to be talking about right now. So the lack of purpose is something that for sure holds people back, because when we do not know our why very clearly, then it makes it really difficult for us to justify the effort of just getting away from our desk that's full of immediate urgent tasks and taking ourselves to networking events. And when we do not know exactly why we're doing this, there are lots of reasons to find, there are a lot of excuses out there. There are lots of reasons to say no to a networking opportunity. So the exercise that we took earlier today, I would also encourage the audience to work on this further, because it will make it probably the biggest difference actually to your motivation. So once we know our why, our purpose, it makes things a lot easier. The fear of discomfort, failure, rejections, all things that I absolutely relate to. In fact, I relate to them 20 years ago, I still relate to this. And although, gaining practical knowledge and a lot of practice under my belt really helps, but the idea of walking into a room full of unfamiliar faces, strange people that, after a tiring day, this is not the definition of comfortable situation. Kind of the idea of networking is almost inherently, yes, it's based on what we have evolved to do as human beings, but it's completely natural to feel like you're out of your comfort zone. So it's finding sort of that ability to be comfortable with being uncomfortable that really is the key to overcoming this sense that, well, it's just something that I do not enjoy doing. And also accepting that you will have a lot of mishaps. You will forget people's names. You will forget why, who are you're speaking to. You will forget what you wanted to say. You will fail to connect with the people probably that you meant to connect there. You will be doing all of these things, and they are par for the course. So not to let the failures define us. And likewise, rejection, social rejection in the context of networking happens quite a lot. And this the example of the rejection that I'm talking about is when you wanted to come up to talk to a specific person, but the person looks like they are not very interested in this interaction, and either completely ignore your efforts to get to know them, to connect with them, or kind of look very lukewarm to your efforts. And in my experience, this is in vast majority of cases anything to do, always have anything to do with this person's agenda rather than with actually with you. And this is really important to bear in mind, because this takes that personal, this rejection stops being personal. It just becomes something that happens in the context of a relationship, which means that this is also something that you can move away from, you can shake off, and then you can move on to better things and to connecting with people that want to connect with you. Because ultimately, it takes two to tango. It takes two interested people to connect with each other. The other scenario that holds people back quite often is just this inherent belief that they're not meant for networking. I quite often hear it from introverts, and there are quite a number of introverts among lawyers, and they would say, well, I'm an introvert, I don't really enjoy the company of people I do not know, networking isn't good for extroverts. And as true as it is that extroverts, classical extroverts, really enjoy the company of other people, but they also don't often make the best networkers. Because one of the highly important elements of a quality of a good networker is the ability to listen, is the ability to also analyze what the other person is saying, really read between the lines and connect with them on a deeper level through knowing, through learning something about themselves. And this learning happens through the act of listening. And guess what? These are the exact skills that a lot of introverts have developed much better than, introverts develop much better than extroverts. Introverts have their listening skills as their superpower. So my advice is to concentrate on your personal qualities. Do not be afraid just to walk into the room as yourself. You do not need to try and be someone else. And finally, but obviously this is not an exclusive list of things that can hold us back, but these are perhaps the most common ones. Certainly everything that I have come across and I have suffered from myself. But finally, the idea that we do not belong in a room. And to me, this is quite, it can be really very downheartening experience, because we feel that if we do not belong in a room, that we need to justify our presence there, and it can take an enormous amount of energy that can actually be used to enjoy other people's company. To my mind, the feeling that we do not belong in a room is just another facet of the imposter syndrome. And in the same way as we would deal with an imposter syndrome, it's important to acknowledge that this is something that we feel when we are walking into a room full of unfamiliar faces, but also do not let it define our efforts. So it's really common, but it shouldn't hold us back, and we shouldn't give it more respect than really it does not deserve. A couple of words on intergenerational networking. So I have mentioned, as I have mentioned at the start of my presentation, we find ourselves now working often in multi-generational environments. And when it comes to interacting and engaging with a generation that is different to others, there are a lot of assumptions that come into play. We assume that people should behave like we do, or like our peer group. And it really can get in the way of establishing this, the common grounds with representatives of different generations. I always find that focusing on commonality is the best thing you can do. But whilst kind of working out things that connect you, perhaps this could be, that you both went to the same university, even if it was sort of 20 years apart, or that you both like the same area of law, or even that you have, you own the same breed of dog. So it doesn't have to be anything particularly intellectual, but the kind of this small connecting points would really make a difference, because this will be the all-important commonality that is established from the get-go, and it will help develop the civilization, will help develop this connection, but also appreciating. So in addition to looking for commonalities, appreciating that you will be different, and staying open-minded to these differences, because we know that different generations think differently. They have different motivations. They express themselves differently. It's always a good idea when we're in communication, choose informal over formal, and really focus on being genuine and authentic, being yourself really, over pretentious or trying to kind of pull a rank on a person, if you like. Being concise over elaborate really helps, because different generations would attach different stigma to a highly formal, elaborate form of communication. But finally, the ability to be vulnerable is really important. I always think that willingness to be vulnerable is the fertile soil really for building genuine connections with others. It's okay to get things wrong. It's okay not to know some cultural references that are perhaps common in the generation that you're talking to. It's okay to admit these things, but that kind of vulnerability is the one that will distinguish someone who will be successful in transitioning through these challenges of intergenerational engagement. So the differences between someone who is successful and someone who is not, that ability to be vulnerable, the ability to accept things that you do not know, and let the other generation perhaps educate you sometimes. And the don'ts, very important. Don't judge the book by its cover. Don't assume that simply because someone has a different approach to work, they're lacking that commitment. Simply because someone is showing up dressed in a different way from you, they show less respect to the environment, and so on. It's really worth bearing these things in mind. And finally, and this really follows on from the early point, trust yourself to be yourself. If you are unable to perform this or to be genuinely yourself, to show yourself authentically, then people will not be wanting to connect with you with a mask. So it's really important, especially when it comes to intergenerational networking, and to engage at an authentic level. So, you know, be yourself, be vulnerable, ask questions, get interested in what the other person has to say. And then the final part of this presentation, I'm going to talk about the practical steps that are worth bearing in mind. And I'm sure none of them are going to be completely new to this audience, but really worth being reminded. So practice, as I said, makes progress. But what are the things that should be borne in mind when we're talking about the networking process, the process that involves the initial connection? Now, when we're entering the room, it's really important to judge our mental availability. Some people take more, will need more time than others just to get ready to start networking, and giving yourself that permission is really important. So is the ability to read the room. What do I mean by reading the room? There are inevitably going to be closed and open groups in any room. We're talking about physical rooms. Open group is the one that is available for other people to come to. So it's kind of open to new people, to in the introduction of new people. And closed groups are the ones that are involved in perhaps an intense conversation that would be quite difficult for a new person to get into. And knowing the body language, or being able to read the very simple signs of someone who is standing in the open group versus someone who is standing in the closed group, are very important, because that will kind of mitigate the instances of feeling rejected or not wanted or not belonging. So it's the easiest thing is always to come up to someone who stands by themselves, or perhaps a group of 2 or 3 people that look like, you know, in body language, open, perhaps looking sideways and welcoming to any newcomer. Just joining by shaking hands, or, you know, smiling and shaking hands, and or asking, can I join you? Such simple techniques, but a lot of people forget to smile. A lot of people just forget to put this, you know, to have this positive vibes about themselves. But this is actually something that can have an instant attraction, and people are instantly, you know, feeling welcoming towards those that are smiling at them. Engaging in a smart small talk. Smart small talk does not have to be something particularly elaborate. It's just it's something that focuses on getting to know the person. So if you ask questions and listen to what the person in front of you talks about, first and foremost, it gives you clues about something that is important to them. And then those clues can be used as hooks to develop a deeper and more meaningful conversation. A meaningful conversation is developed through asking questions that ask for, require more information. You know, what, why, how. Questions that show that you are interested in a person. And then don't forget to listen with attention, to listen what the other person is saying. Do not constantly keep thinking, what am I saying now? But just listen with attention. An initial connection shouldn't last perhaps, or a standard connection shouldn't last perhaps more than 10-15 minutes. And a lot of us sometimes feel really awkward about saying goodbye or kind of partying with the person that you are speaking to. It can be done really gracefully by acknowledging that it was nice meeting the person. You can just simply say, it was lovely meeting you. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I would love to stay connected. These are the three elements, the 3 elements that are required to part company with someone are very simple. You do not need to think of some external factors that call you, that need your attention. Just being genuinely graceful about acknowledging that you enjoy the person, and also your intention to stay connected with them. That's all. That is all that is needed. And finally, and I'm not going to dwell too much on this because we have already mentioned this, but follow up, follow up, and follow up. Follow up. Without the follow up, there's no relationship. Without the follow up, your efforts with to connect with people really go wasted. So it's really important to follow up, ideally within a few days, but certainly up to a week following the initial connection. And although we're not talking about virtual networking in the space of today's webinar, it's just worth knowing that if you do need to network virtually, the most important thing to remember is to be even more strategic than you normally would be about the people that you're looking to meet, because simply you do not have this ability to walk around and to meet different people at different times. And I will finish by saying that networking is, in fact, it's a marathon. It's a process and it is a marathon. But unlike the actual marathon, it's something that is very giving. It will energize you, it will provide you with great opportunity. And as I said, it's likely to have transformative effect on your life and in your career. And finally, please, in the spirit of networking, feel free to connect with me. You would have found my LinkedIn profile in the chat, and I will be delighted to answer any questions and to hear any feedback that you have on this presentation. And I hope that you have enjoyed it and find it useful.
Thank you, Alyssa. If anyone does have a burning question, please put it in the chat and we'll do our best to, answer it and come back to you, if not now, after the session. So do feel free to pop any questions you have into the chat right now. We'd love to hear what you thought of this session. Did you find it useful? Was there more you'd like to hear about on this topic? So as always, again, pop your feedback in the chat or drop us a note, cxprogram@dentons.com. We have lots of sessions coming up. We're really looking forward to seeing lots of you back online for them. You'll see the list here. And as always, feel free to share with your team and with individuals in your organizations. I want to say a huge thanks to everybody for joining us today. And we are looking forward to that continued engagement and hoping that this program helps to facilitate lots of networking and connections after today's session. Finally, massive thanks to Alyssa for such a candid and interesting session today, and in particular for jumping in so late with us on this particular session. So we were really excited and delighted to have you join us today. That's it from us for today. We're wishing you all a great rest of day wherever you are.